This is the Rocky Mountain Myrek Short Takes on Suicide Prevention podcast. I'm Adam Hoffberg, and today we are joined by Dr. Nathaan Demers. He is Director of Clinical Programs with Grit Digital Health, and I'm really excited to learn about all the awesome work you all are doing. Nathaan is a clinical psychologist by training, and he's inspired to sort of think outside of traditional mental health care and really interested in working with young adult and college populations. So today we're going to talk about their portal called You at College. Welcome, Nathaan.
Thanks. Really excited to be here.
Great. Just to give us a little background, lay of the land, a little bit about where you came from and what got you into this work with Grit Digital.
Sure. I guess a little background about myself. So I am a clinical psychologist, and I did take a little bit of a non-traditional career path. I always had an interest in systems and how things work, which actually stemmed from being a soccer player, experiencing a pretty big injury, and coaching my senior year rather than playing, something that was totally unexpected. And throughout my graduate school experience, I was always, while I was very clinically trained, I was really focusing on the who's, the how's, the what's, how is this funding, why are people coming to us instead of someone else? And that's what really got me into working big systems type of stuff, which ultimately got me to Grit Digital Health.
Great. And just as a little aside, I'm very curious where the Grit Digital Health name comes from, just because it's so catchy and, I was just kind of curious.
Absolutely. So Grit is actually a spin-off of Cactus Marketing, which we can get into a little bit later. But the idea of what we're trying to do is help people build grit and resilience to lead happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. So that's the idea, is building grit and resilience amongst...
and what does grit mean in that way?
Grit, like Duckworth's research, the ability to persevere for long-term goals and tasks, overcome adversity. I see it really similar to resilience.
Okay,
but
great.
It does sound cooler than resilience.
It does. It definitely does. And now, it sort of fits with everything that we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely.
So, as we mentioned, this portal is called You at College. It's for college students. It's sort of a well-being portal. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I guess if you don't mind, I'll start with a little bit of the background and where we came from, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Back in 2012, Colorado actually had some extra block grant dollars, and they were looking to address the high rates of suicide amongst working class men. And what they did was something really innovative, and they actually partnered with a nonprofit organization, the Carson J. Spencer Foundation, the Office of Suicide Prevention, and Cactus Marketing. And they made a campaign called mantherapy.org. And what it did was, it was a digital platform that harnessed the power of creativity and, of all things, humor to get people talking about mental health. And the campaign, it's really funny, it's even vulgar at times, but what we learned is that it got men talking about mental health, which is something that traditionally men don't want to talk about. And from there, that campaign had tremendous success both nationally and internationally. And we kind of said, if we can do this really well for men, what about doing the same thing or similar thing for college populations? Because we know mental health is top of mind and a real issue with that population.
That's helpful, and see it sort of evolving over time, and you could sort of start to see where this idea is forming and where you all are coming from. But one of the articles I was reading as a background was talking about this hidden health crisis on college campuses, and you sort of touched on this idea that suicide and mental health is a big issue in this population. Tell us a little bit more about the background and why this work is really important for this population.
Absolutely. So I did work in college counseling for a little while, and what worried me most in that role is not the students who were coming in my door, but the students who didn't. So we know that 1 in 4 students, college students, has a diagnosable behavioral health condition, but 40% of that population won't ever get help. And furthermore, 1 in 3 students drop out, and over 50% of students who don't graduate or leave school because of a mental health condition, they've never tapped into campus resources for that condition. So we knew that there's really a gap between service provision and need. And what really got me into this is suicide's the second leading cause of death on college campuses. And over 60% of individuals who die by suicide under the age of 35 have never seen a mental health provider. So for myself, that was really a call to action to say, we're doing well with people coming in our door, but who's worrying about that whole population who isn't coming in our door and is being affected by suicide? So one thing we know that college students spend 8 to 10 hours on their phones a day, whether you like it or not, and it is oftentimes the first place that students look for support because they're digital natives.
So you use this term digital native. What is that?
Absolutely. So it's exactly what it sounds like, in that millennials and college students nowadays really grew up with the internet at their fingertips in a way that myself, my parents, other generations didn't. And what that really means is that the internet is the first place that these students are looking for support, especially around stigmatized topics such as mental health, because A, it's available 24/7, 365, and B, it allows for a level of confidentiality and anonymity that you normally don't get when you're asking some pretty tough questions about mental health. And we know right now on college campuses there's really this idea that it's not okay to not be okay. Everyone asks how you're doing. Oh, I'm doing great, even though you just failed a class, you were up all night drinking, you maybe had unprotected sex last night, you're really worried about that, but no, I'm good, I don't have a behavioral health problem. Mm-hmm. So this is a place where students can start going and exploring resources to really inform their behavior in a way that's vetted by clinical psychologists, because Google has some great resources, but we also know it has some really bad resources. So we want to make sure that students are connecting to quality content.
That's helpful, and I'm starting to get a picture of how this U portal works, but could you get into a little bit more about how it was all developed? And before you do that, I just want to also mention that you touched on this idea of being a very accessible format and one where we can get past some of the privacy and confidentiality concerns, and I definitely want to make sure we return to that. For now, just tell us a little bit more about how you went about developing U at college.
Yeah. So after the success of Man Therapy, the CEO of Cactus Marketing he's really, really passionate about behavioral health. And he's a Colorado State University alumni, and they had a really tragic year where they had a number of suicides on campus. And they had heard of Man Therapy, they knew a lot of the work that Joe was doing, so they decided to give him a call and get together to talk about possible solutions. So we took the idea of Man Therapy and said, let's put it in front of college students and see what happens. And college students got it, they thought it was funny and engaging, but at the end of the day they said, this is for my dad, not for me. So we took the lessons learned from Man Therapy, which were you need to be digital, you need to be technologically savvy, you need to be funny, and it has to be confidential and anonymous. And we started from scratch. So from there, we decided to actually form a public-private partnership with Colorado State. So we knew on our end, on the grit side, we had experts in behavioral health and technology and marketing and communications, but we also needed to work really closely with higher ed, because higher ed systems are really large bureaucratic entities. And that's how we really got this off the ground, was working side by side in partnership with CSU.
Mm-hmm. And I understand there was a good deal of stakeholder input in developing the program and sort of testing its usability.
Absolutely. So we did a lot of that. And one thing that's really excited being in my current role is, in psychology, we tend to make evidence-based platforms. We do all this research, make sure it's evidence-based through and through. But one thing we often forget to do is test it with our users. And a lot of times we make these great things, and it turns out people don't want to use them because they're not fun or not engaging. Mm-hmm. And what's really fun about working with agency that's really has its roots in marketing is I'm able to combine my skills as a psychologist and bring that evidence-based piece, and the marketing folks are able to come and bring that market research. So we did a lot of user testing, a lot of focus groups, which really allowed us to make a platform that students want to use, rather than some of the other things that we've made in psychology that tend only to be used when you're in a state of crisis, or a screening tool once you're depressed. We want to connect students to resources long before they're ever in a state of crisis. And we worked really closely with other administrators on campus, from the legal department to the health center to their psychology research department.
That was really well said, and you touched on a couple points I want to follow up on. One is this idea that you already talked, it's a partnership with the university, and so I could see that there's a delicate balance. You're not trying to replace their services, you're not trying to supersede what's already going on with the mental health counseling centers there. Could you talk about how it fits in with the other services that exist on the university campus?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and one reason we decided to work with colleges is that we know colleges have amazing resources for students. I think of my college experience, there's 500 clubs and organizations first day when you get there, but a lot of times you're so overwhelmed because you're more worried about relationships and being away from home for the first time, you don't necessarily digest all those resources at your disposal. So what we know, and from my experience as a college counselor, we know that students often wait till they're in a state of crisis to reach for support, whether it's academic support because they're failing 3 classes or something related to mental health. And what we want to do is get students connected to those resources long before they're ever in a state of crisis. So if we can make a platform, which is what we did, that students can navigate this plethora of resources we can start catering content to them to match their experience and connect them to the right resource at the right time. And just as an aside, CSU had 12 different college portals, all for different things. One for grades, one for social activities. And we knew, especially for a college student in distress, navigating 12 different portals is not something we want students to have to do. So we wanted to make one platform that has all of campus resources, in addition to a lot of psychoeducation, and they can access that whenever they want with one click.
That's great. Definitely sounds like a good fit for university student needs. I want to touch on this idea that upstream prevention, it's a very commonly used word, and so you already touched at the idea that we want to get to students before they're in crisis. Talk to me a little bit of how the U at College platform aims to be an upstream approach.
Absolutely. So there's a few things there. So the first is we know just trends nationally. College counseling utilization rates are going up 5 times out of enrollment. And college counseling centers are having a really difficult time keeping up for demand. And in my opinion, it's more of a systemic issue in that we're not just going to hire our way out of this. We need to look at different solutions to connect students to resources. And in my experience, not every college student needs counseling. I think of the student who comes from a small town and ends up at a bigger university and is away from home for the first time, classes are maybe a little harder than they thought, and they're not meeting people as easily as they thought, so maybe they start medicating with alcohol and skipping classes. And that can really lead to a pretty negative downward spiral. And ideally, the idea of upstream is if we can connect that student to the right club, the right mentor, the right academic resource, maybe that situation never happens. And the second idea of upstream is if we can increase mental health literacy, instead of students coming in with severe depression or getting referred after they have a full-blown substance abuse disorder or an RA finds that someone was cutting or was experiencing suicidal ideation, we can get students in the counseling center when they have mild anxiety, mild depression. We can work with that much better. Our systems of care can work with that. And we can kind of decrease that 90-10 rule where we have 10% of people using 90% of the resources.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned also about this idea of the portal bringing together a lot of resources across a lot of different domains of life, from academic to mental health. Talk to us a little bit more about how that looks.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to our focus groups and user research, our students' focus groups really said that if you made just a mental health platform or a suicide prevention app, we're not going to go to it. It's simply not cool. That's not where I want to be. So very clearly from the get-go, we learned that we had to be bigger than that. So we decided to have 3 domains of wellness. So we have Succeed, which is all about academic and career success. Thrive is about physical and mental health. And Matter is about finding purpose and connection on campus. And what's really nice about that is the students really informed us and said, this is what we need to use it. But the other piece, we know mental health issues don't happen in a vacuum. When a student doesn't feel connected to the student body, that's when depression can set in, or an adjustment disorder. And if classes are really hard and you feel like everyone else knows exactly what they're going to do and declared that they're major and you don't know what you're doing, that's a real sense of anxiety. So if we can help students navigate those 3 realms, we can do something great. And something I'm really excited about, again, as a psychologist on the team, we found that most of our users enter the portal looking for help with a resume or something in Succeed or a club in Matter, but by far our most viewed content is stress, anxiety, depression, and how to help a friend. So at the end of the day, we know we're getting our users to where they want to be. Similar with man therapy. Men don't traditionally want to talk about mental health. A lot of college students don't either. But when we get it there in a platform and in a language that they understand, they're using these resources, which is really, really exciting for us.
Yeah, that is super exciting. And so we have Succeed, we have Thrive, and we have Matter. And I understand within those, you can also sort of personalize and tailor the content based on an individual user and what their interests are. Tell us a little bit more about that piece of it.
Seeing it is really helpful, but we'll do the best we can because we're on a podcast. So within each of those domains, I'm just going to break out Thrive for a second. There's subdomains. So if I'm a student and I know, I want to look for something around mental health, I can look in the Thrive domain and I'll see things like sleep, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, suicidal ideation, diet, exercise, and then the same for the other 2 domains. So if I sort of know what I want, I can access content that way. If I know exactly what I want, I can use a search function, type in anything from prescription Adderall abuse to suicidal ideation to study tips, and I'll be connected to content. But where things really get interesting, in my opinion, is students fill out a quick profile. And what that does is gets a quick snapshot of who the student user is. So are they, what year in school? Are they from in-state, out-of-state, or an international student? Do they live on campus or off campus? As well as special populations and experiences. So are you a student athlete? Do you identify as having a disability? Are you a member of the LGBTQ plus community? As well as being a student veteran. And as soon as a student does that, all of our content, we have about 600 pieces of content, start actually catering to who this student user is. And we know that's so important because minority populations tend to access resources at lower rates than majority populations. So what we're trying to do with that is put resources that are hyper-relevant to the user. And if you put something right in front of someone at the right time and they're one click away, the likelihood of them actually using that goes through the roof. And there's one other way we actually whittled down a little bit further. Across each of the domains, Succeed, Thrive, and Matter, we made an assessment, which we call a reality check, because assessment's a very scary word. So these reality checks, again, are just getting a snapshot of how a student's functioning. And again, I'm going to talk about Thrive, being a psychologist, and that's my passion. We're asking about things like sleep, how do you cope with stress, do you feel you have a supportive support network? Anxiety, depression, suicidality, and substance abuse. And as soon as you're finished that quick assessment, it's very light, kind of like taking a Cosmo quiz. As far possible from taking like a BDI or a PHQ-9, you get a results page. And the whole point of that is to raise students' awareness. And I don't know about yourself, but I can speak to my undergrad and graduate experiences where health and wellness, unfortunately, wasn't top of my to-do list. And there is, unfortunately, a lot of times that it actually fell right off. And what we're trying to do there is really clearly, without evaluating the students, saying, hey, you know what, sleep's something that you should probably put a little attention towards so this doesn't derail your college experience. Or body image is something that seems to be creeping in there. And then with one click, a student can click and get connected to customized resources based on their reality check results as well as who they are as a user that they filled out in their profile.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And of course, with our work with veterans, it's always great to hear that there's, tailored resources for student veterans as well.
Absolutely. And for our veterans, there's actually a plethora of resources that veterans have access to, and a lot of times we found that they don't know about them. So all of a sudden, this is the way that we're getting students connected to those resources specific for them as student veterans.
Great. So let's turn now back to what I was calling the elephant in the room, which is this whole privacy, confidentiality concerns, because clearly, again, just putting myself back in those shoes, you're answering these questions, you're saying you might have a sleep issue, you may be taking, alcohol or other drugs, and you're worried about who's seeing this and how might it affect your grades or your academic standing. So tell us a little bit about how your platform handles this.
And it's a great question. So going back to our market research and those focus groups, students said loud and clear that if I went onto this portal and let's say I typed in suicide or opioid abuse and I was worried about a knock on my door from my RA or my advisor, there is no way I'm going on that portal. So we've gone through a lot of work to make sure that this is strictly confidential, anonymous. We have a quick onboarding video at the introduction page, and it's very clearly said that all your use in this portal is confidential and anonymous. And we do all the hosting of the site, so it's actually totally separate from universities' IT departments, so that students can really feel comfortable knowing that we can't look at that. We can look at aggregate data, and that's a really helpful thing to give back to the university to say, what are your most viewed areas of content, so that universities in real time all of a sudden can start guiding their resource allocation and FTE to do outreach instead of doing the classic, let's do another alcohol screen because we think that's important. Maybe amongst freshmen international students, the pressing issue is prescription Adderall abuse, and then the university can tailor resources accordingly.
That's actually also a great segue into talking about some of the results and some of the data that you do have. Again, at that aggregate level, what are some of the things you're finding out in terms of both the usability and what folks are looking up and how this all looks in action?
So we have a few different metrics that we're using to measure our success as a younger organization thus far. So first, in the very short term, one thing we look at is are students using the site? So first, we know that we've had over 20,000 unique sessions on the portal, which we're really excited about. Selfishly, we want to get that to be much greater, but of course we think that's a great start. We actually had 1,500 students log on, create profiles, and start interacting with resources before ever stepping foot on campus. And why we're so excited about that is for that freshman class, the culture is being set that whenever I need something related to my college experience, you at college is the place I go. So that's a class that we're really excited to study longitudinally to find out their use. A couple other short-term statistics. We did our first version of the site. We launched it, our full campus launch at CSU the spring of 2016, and we maintained an average time on site of 5 minutes, which we were really excited about. Do you have any idea average time on site?
No, I was going to say, tell us a little bit about, framing that statistic compared to other sites. So
the average time on site for a millennial is between 8 and 30 seconds. So before I joined this tech world, it meant nothing to me either. But knowing that we're, over 10 times that, it means students are actually coming to the platform and interacting meaningfully with it. And getting back to version 1, we also made a great portal. To start, you have to start somewhere. And then we had 20,000 users use it, and we got a lot of feedback from them. And from that, we decided to make a really big investment to make a version 2.0. And that version really didn't change the functionality. It wasn't for us or administrators. It was for student users. So we added things like trending content. We added out the goal tracking ability. And we used to look a lot like Pinterest, and we learned that that's kind of old news for a lot of millennials. Again, I had no idea. That's our user testing. So we have much more of kind of an editorial feel. And since that launch, which was this January, our average time on site actually went up to 9 minutes and 30 seconds.
Oh, wow.
So we know that we made some really great improvements, and we're really, really excited about that.
Yeah, that is super exciting, and I think that was the version that I got to demo, and I was really impressed with the way that it, looked and felt. And like you said, that's so important when you want people to actually use your product.
Mm-hmm. And to share it with friends and say, hey, you know what, I am worried about my roommate, and I can recommend that he or she looks at some alcohol-related content or whatever else it might be. And then a couple other statistics we've done some survey data with our users. And as of last spring, 2016, we did a survey of 350 users, and 87% of them said that they connected to a new campus resource because of their interactions with the portal. And that's, again, getting back to that upstream approach, to getting students connected to what's already available on campus. 76% of students said that their interactions with the portal helped them manage their stress, which we know that I think it's over 50% of students in the last 12 months nationally said that they've experienced levels of stress or to a level of not being able to function. And then the last statistic we're really excited about is 98% of first years said that they learned something new about themselves across each of the domains. So again, first years being a very vulnerable population, being away from home for the first time, being afforded a lot of freedoms, they're learning a lot of great things about themselves to guide their behavior and make informed decisions.
It's great to hear, and look forward to hearing more updates as you all get further into it. I mean, it's amazing. Your product's only not even 2 years old yet.
Yeah, it's not even 2 years old. We've already done an update, and we have a roadmap for a number of other improvements. And not to compare us to a Facebook, but we see ourselves as making consistent updates. Whenever we show it to a new institution or get it in front of new students, we get new ideas. And we want to be able to implement those as they come up. So we're really excited to see where this goes down the road.
Thinking about, you mentioned you're at CSU, Colorado State. What other schools are you looking to branch out into?
We launched at Colorado State University this fall, and again, they're our public-private partners. We also launched at Colorado Mesa University as of this fall, so they did more of a soft launch this fall, so it was available to all students, but this spring is when they're really going to be pushing it. Mm-hmm. And being a younger organization, those are our two universities right now, and we're really looking to get out there now. So we have, I'd say, 10 to 15 universities who we're very hopeful that are going to get on board this spring semester. We're really, really excited about that.
Very exciting time, and thank you so much for explaining all this and shedding some awareness about this awesome program going on called You at College. Any other final thoughts here for today?
No, I guess I'd just like to thank you for doing this podcast. I know mental health tends to shy away from technology, and there's great power in it with the things we're doing, what you're doing, sharing ideas. I'm really excited to be here, and hope there's more and more of this going forward.
So thanks, everyone, for joining us for the Short Takes podcast today. We appreciate you for listening. Listeners, you can learn more about Dr. Demers and Grit Digital Health by clicking on the links accompanying the podcast. Take a moment to subscribe and share with your colleagues, and of course, we welcome any comments or questions. And join us next time for more important interviews on work going on in suicide prevention.